I always thought my life was simple, maybe even boring, but it was mine. And back then, I believed it was enough. I woke up every morning to the soft sound of Alina boiling water for tea. She always made 2 cups, one for her, one for me. She liked her tea strong and dark, while mine was always sweet and light. She said it matched our personalities. I used to laugh whenever she said that. I thought that meant something. Our home wasn't big, but it was warm. Or maybe I only imagined it was. A small apartment with cream walls, wooden furniture, and old but comfortable sofas. We filled it with small things we bought together, cheap decorations, mismatched cushions, a painting she said reminded her of calm waves. Every time I looked at it, I felt peaceful. That's how blind I was. Back then, I didn't notice the silence between us growing thicker than walls. I didn't see how she started spending more time on her phone than looking at me. I didn't feel how her hugs became short and cold, like she was just completing a duty. I told myself it was stress. Maybe she was tired. Maybe work was hard. Maybe I wasn't giving her enough time. I blamed myself for everything. That morning was like any other. I got ready for work, fixed my tie, and kissed her forehead. She didn't kiss back. She didn't even look at me. She kept typing on her phone with a small smile. I didn't ask who she was talking to. I should have. But I trusted her so much that the thought of betrayal never even entered my mind. If I'm honest, even if I had known, I would have forgiven her. I left home thinking everything was normal. But that was the day everything changed. I finished my office work earlier than usual. My boss left for a meeting, and there wasn't much to do. So I decided to surprise Alina. I thought maybe we could cook dinner together or watch a movie like we used to. I even bought her favorite pastries on the way home, cream-filled ones with powdered sugar. I was smiling the whole ride back. I didn't know that smile would be the last innocent one I ever had. When I reached the apartment building, everything felt normal. Kids playing in the hallway, the old neighbor scolding someone cooking something spicy 2 doors down. The usual everyday noises. But when I got closer to my door, I heard something unfamiliar, Alina's laugh. It wasn't the soft laugh she gave me. It was loud, playful, almost flirtatious. A kind of laugh she hadn't made around me in months. For a second, I froze. My heartbeat accelerated. A strange fear spread through my chest, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she's on a call, I whispered to myself. But then I heard another voice. A man's voice. Deep, confident, familiar. My cousin Zahir. My stomach dropped. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. I pressed my ear against the door, and every cell in my body screamed that something was wrong. My breathing got faster, and I had to press my hand on my chest to calm down. I heard him say, laughing, "See? I told you he's too soft. He won't even question it." And Alina replied, "You're right. He trusts me too much." My heart cracked right there. I didn't need to hear anything else. I knew. The truth was sharp, ugly, and undeniable. But still, I stood there, silent and trembling, hoping, begging, that I misunderstood. Then I heard movement. Something fell. They laughed again. My vision blurred for a moment, and I had to blink away tears. I slowly turned the doorknob. It wasn't locked. The door opened with a soft creak that felt louder than thunder. And there they were. I saw Alina sitting on the sofa, our sofa, too close to Zahir. His arm around her shoulders. Her head resting near his chest. Their faces too close. Her smile too wide. Their hands touching. The room felt colder than ice. Time stopped. I felt like I was punched in the heart. I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened. My fingers went numb. My knees almost gave out. I dropped the pastry box without realizing. It hit the floor with a soft thud, spilling cream onto the carpet. Alina looked up at me, not guilty, not scared, just annoyed. Like I had disturbed her. "What are you doing here so early?" she snapped, as if I was the one who did something wrong. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My voice was trapped behind the shock and pain choking me. I stared at her, then at Zahir. My own cousin. He smirked at me. A slow, mocking smirk. He didn't even try to stand or move away. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look ashamed. He just looked amused, like this was a joke to him. "Surprise," he said softly. "You should knock." My heart squeezed painfully. I finally managed to whisper, "Alina, what is this?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. We were just talking." "Talking?" I repeated, barely breathing. Zahir chuckled. "Relax, brother. You're overthinking." Brother. The way he said it made me want to scream. I took a shaky step forward. Why is he here? Why is he touching you?" Alina sighed loudly, like she was tired of me. "Because he listens to me. Because he understands me. Because he gives me the life I want." Her last words hit me harder than anything else. Zahir leaned back and crossed his arms. "You're too soft. You're too simple. You think love is enough. It's not." My vision blurred again, this time from tears. I felt like my chest was tearing open. A burning pain spread inside me. I wanted to shout. I wanted to cry. I wanted to hit something. But I couldn't move. Alina stood up and walked toward me. For a moment, I hoped she would explain, apologize, deny it, anything. But she simply snatched her purse from the table and said coldly, "You can't give me the life I want." I stared at her, stunned. "So this is about money?" She shrugged. "Partly. But also, I'm tired of pretending. You're not enough for me." Her words were knives. Sharp. Cruel. Delivered with a straight face. Zahir stood up and put his arm around her waist. "Come on, Alina. Let's go." I watched them walk toward the door, walk past me, like I was nothing. I couldn't move. I felt frozen. When they reached the door, Alina paused and looked back at me. Not with sadness. Not with remorse. But with irritation. "Don't call me," she said. "Don't try to fix anything. Let it go." Then she left. The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed was louder than any scream. I dropped to the floor. My legs couldn't hold me. My hands trembled uncontrollably. The pain in my chest grew so strong I thought I might faint. Tears streamed down my face without stopping. I cried in a way I didn't know I could. My heart felt like it was dying. Maybe it did die that day. I stayed on the floor for a long time, staring at the cream-covered carpet, feeling my world collapsing piece by piece. Every memory with Alina burned me from the inside. Every laugh, every kiss, every promise felt like a lie now. I whispered to myself over and over, why? Why me? What did I do wrong? No answer came. Just silence. Just pain. Just emptiness. That was the day I realized love can kill a man slowly. And that was the day my heart died. The floor felt cold beneath me, and yet I couldn't move. I don't know how long I sat there, minutes, hours, maybe the whole night. Time had no meaning after what I saw. My fingers were numb, my eyes swollen, my throat dry from crying. My heart didn't beat normally anymore. It felt like something heavy was crushing it every second. The apartment was silent. Too silent. It felt empty without Alina's presence, and yet the thought of her being here made me sick. I looked at the cream stain from the pastries on the floor and realized how symbolic it was, something sweet ruined and wasted. Just like my marriage. I finally forced myself to stand, but everything felt blurry. My head spun, and I grabbed the table to stop myself from falling. My body felt weak, as if all my strength had been drained by shock and betrayal. I walked to the bedroom, hoping, stupidly, that she might still be there. Of course, she wasn't. Her clothes were gone from the closet. Her jewelry box was empty. Even her perfume bottle was missing from the dresser. It hit me then, she had planned this. She wasn't confused or unsure. She knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't leave me. She replaced me. With Zahir. My own cousin. The thought made me feel sick. I sat on the bed and buried my face in my hands. The room smelled like her, mocking me with the memories of our nights together, our laughter, our quiet moments. I whispered to myself, why wasn't I enough? The question echoed in my head like a curse. I tried to sleep, but my body refused to shut down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face leaning against Zahir, her cold expression when she looked at me, his smirk. My chest tightened again until I had to sit up, gasping for breath. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I dragged myself to the office. I didn't want to go, but I needed to get away from the apartment. When I walked in, my coworker Assad looked at me and frowned. Bro, you okay? You look bad. I forced a smile. Didn't sleep much. He nodded but didn't believe me. No one would. My face probably said everything, red eyes, pale skin, shaking hands. I sat at my desk and tried to work, but my mind kept replaying what I saw. I kept touching my chest because the pain refused to go away. Around noon, my phone buzzed with messages. I didn't want to check, but I glanced anyway. They were from unknown numbers. Heard your wife left you. Wow, she ran off with your cousin? Bro, that's embarrassing. Alina said you couldn't satisfy her. I froze. My breath stopped. Alina didn't just leave me, she humiliated me publicly. And Zahir helped her. I could feel my pulse rising, my hands shaking violently. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might explode. My vision went dark around the edges. Assad, I whispered, grabbing the side of my desk. I don't feel good. He rushed to my side just as my legs gave way. He tried to hold me up, but I collapsed on the floor. My chest felt like it was being stabbed from inside. My breathing came out in quick, sharp gasps. Call an ambulance. Assad shouted, his voice panicked. The last thing I heard before everything went black was someone yelling my name. I woke up to the sound of machines beeping slowly. My eyes blinked open, and a white ceiling stared back at me. I felt something tight around my arm and wires attached to my chest. I was in a hospital. A soft voice spoke beside me, "You're awake." Thank God. I turned my head and saw her, Sana. My childhood friend. Someone I had ignored for years because Alina said she was too attached to me. Someone I should never have distanced myself from. She looked worried, her eyes full of fear. Sana? I croaked. She nodded quickly and wiped her tears. You scared me. They said you collapsed at work. They called me since I'm still your emergency contact. I swallowed, my throat dry. How bad is it? Before Sana could answer, the doctor walked in, Dr. Cameron. A middle-aged man with calm eyes and a serious expression. He glanced at the monitor inside. You gave us all a scare. Your heart is under severe stress. My heart? I whispered. He nodded. Your heartbeat became dangerously irregular. Emotional shock can do that, especially when the body is already under pressure. I looked away. I didn't want to talk about Alina. I didn't want to say her name. Dr. Cameron continued, listen carefully. You need rest. Real rest. No stress, no emotional triggers, no arguments. If this continues, you could face long-term damage. I laughed weakly. Too late for that. Sana squeezed my hand. Stop joking. This is serious. Her warmth felt comforting, and I didn't realize until that moment how long it had been since someone held my hand without judgment. Dr. Cameron added, you need to avoid all emotional strain. Whoever or whatever is causing this, you have to cut them out. I closed my eyes slowly. Cut them out? I already did. Or maybe they cut me out first. Later that night, Sana stayed beside me. She sat quietly, not pushing me to talk, just being there. Her presence felt safe. I stared at the ceiling and whispered. Alina left. She stayed silent for a moment, then said softly, I know. I felt tears forming again. With Zahir. Sana closed her eyes, holding back anger. You don't deserve this. I laughed bitterly. Doesn't matter. It still happened. She leaned forward. Then let me tell you something you need to hear. Alina didn't leave you because you weren't enough. She left because she wasn't enough. Her words hit harder than I expected. I turned my head and looked at her. Her eyes were soft but firm, filled with anger on my behalf, something Alina never showed. I swallowed. It doesn't hurt any less. It won't, she said. Not today. Not tomorrow. But pain fades. I shook my head. Not this kind. She leaned back into her chair. Then you learn to live around it. Her voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, I realized she was hurting too, because she cared. The next morning, I woke up to a loud knock on the hospital door. I thought maybe someone brought breakfast or medication. But when the door opened, my breath stopped. A man in a suit walked in holding a folder. Mr. Ahmed? He asked. Yes, I said slowly. He opened the folder and placed it in my lap. These are divorce papers. Mrs. Alina requested urgent processing. My entire body froze. Sana shot up from her chair. Are you serious? Right now? He's injured. The man shrugged. I'm just delivering. I stared at the papers. Her signature was already there. Sharp. Cold. Clean. Like she couldn't wait to erase me from her life. The room felt smaller. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. Sana grabbed the papers and threw them on the floor. She didn't even come herself? She sent someone? The man left without apology. I stared at the papers scattered on the tiles, my heart breaking all over again. Sana knelt beside the bed and whispered, "She didn't deserve you. She never did." But all I could think about was how easily she left me. How quickly she replaced me. How confidently she moved on while I was lying in a hospital bed fighting for breath. I closed my eyes, letting the pain wash over me. This betrayal wasn't a knife. It was slow poison. And it was killing me from the inside. That was the moment I understood something important. She didn't just break my heart. She broke my spirit. She broke my trust. She broke the version of me that believed love conquers everything. That version of me died the moment I signed the divorce papers with shaking hands. And at that moment, I didn't know it yet. But the man who would rise from this pain would be someone completely different. Someone stronger. Someone colder. Someone who would never let anyone destroy him again. The days after the divorce papers felt like walking through fog. I was in the hospital, but my mind wasn't with the doctors, the monitors, or the white walls around me. It was with Alina, her smile, her cold words, her betrayal. And with Zahir, laughing, smirking, like they had won something that was never theirs. I thought about leaving. Not physically, though part of me wanted to vanish, but leaving the version of myself that loved her, trusted her, believed in her. That version of me was useless now. Dead, in every way that mattered. Sana sat by my bed one evening, her hands folded over mine. "You can't stay here forever, you know. The world's still moving, even if you're stopped." "I don't care about the world anymore," I said bitterly. "The only thing I cared about left me. And my family, my cousin, betrayed me. Everything I believed in is gone." She shook her head slowly. "Not everything. You're still here. You're still breathing. That's a start." I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't going to pity me. She didn't care that I was broken, at least not in a way that would weaken me further. Her presence felt grounding. Solid. Real. For a brief moment, I wondered if I could ever feel safe again. Then I remembered the hospital room. The papers. The laughter. The way they didn't even hesitate to erase me. That memory hit me like a punch to the chest. I realized something then, something that would change everything. I couldn't go back. I couldn't be the man I was. The next morning, I signed the consent form for surgery. The heart condition wasn't going to wait for me to heal emotionally. Dr. Cameron explained the risks. It was a complicated procedure. Chances of complications were high. But I nodded silently. I didn't care if the surgery failed. Not really. Before they wheeled me into the operating room, Sana grabbed my hand. "Promise me you'll fight," she said softly. I looked at her, my face pale and drained. "Why?" "For what?" "For yourself," she said. "Not for her. Not for Zahir. For you. You deserve to live." I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. I didn't want to live for anyone else. I wanted to disappear, but I also wanted to survive, to rise. Somehow, I knew that survival was my only choice. And so I chose. I don't remember much from the surgery. Just flashes, lights, voices, a sense of floating. At some point, I stopped existing. Or at least, the world thought I had. When I woke up, it was quieter than I expected. The monitor beeped steadily. My body ached in ways I couldn't describe. The nurse was there, adjusting my fore. "You made it," she said. Her voice was calm, but I could hear relief beneath it. I tried to sit up, but my body protested. My chest felt fragile, like someone had packed it with glass shards. Dr. Cameron appeared again. "You were clinically dead for 3 minutes," he said, his voice careful. 3 minutes where no one could have saved you if we weren't ready. I tried to process it. 3 minutes. Dead. And during that time, they had probably thought it was the end. Alina. Zahir. Did they even care? Sanaa's hand squeezed mine. "You're alive," she whispered. "And that's what matters." I nodded, but inside, something had shifted. I didn't feel alive in the same way. I felt changed. Over the next few days, I made my decision. I wasn't going to run back to Alina. I wasn't going to beg, apologize, or explain. I wasn't going to let them see me weak again. I called lawyer Farid. He looked surprised when I requested to finalize the divorce immediately. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure," I said. No delays. No arguments. No waiting. He nodded, though I could tell he sensed the steel in my voice. "As you wish." I handed the papers over, signed them, and left everything behind: the apartment, her possessions, the life we had built. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But I didn't cry this time. I just let a quiet emptiness fill me. I realized that this emptiness was a choice. Pain was inevitable, but I could decide how to carry it. And I chose to carry it like armor. When I finally left the hospital, the world felt different. Brighter in some ways, harsher in others. The streets I had walked 1,000 times now felt foreign. Cars honked with an urgency I hadn't noticed before. People laughed, argued, lived. And I was walking among them, but I wasn't the same man who had collapsed in that office or cried on his apartment floor. I started small. A rented apartment in a quieter part of the city. I didn't buy furniture. I didn't decorate. I didn't even unpack all the boxes. I just needed a place to exist without reminders of betrayal. Sanaa visited often, but I didn't talk much. Words felt useless. I didn't need sympathy. I didn't need pity. I needed strength. I spent my days reading, writing, and thinking about the future. Not a future with Alina. Not a future with Zahir. My future. Mine and mine alone. One evening, while reviewing old financial statements, I realized something important. I wasn't as helpless as I felt. My skills, my mind, my knowledge of business, investment, and finance were still intact. My health might be fragile, my heart scarred, but my brain still worked. I could rebuild. Not for anyone else, not for revenge, not for recognition. For me. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope made me think. Hope made me plan. I would rise again. That night, I wrote a letter. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I needed to close the door on the old me. I didn't intend to send it. It wasn't to Alina. It wasn't to Zahir. It was for myself. I forgive you. Not for your sake, but for mine. You have no power over me anymore. I am leaving behind the man who loved too easily, trusted too much, and suffered in silence. He is gone. I am gone. The new me begins tomorrow. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and didn't look back. The choice had been made. The man who would rise from this pain would not be weak. He would not be naive. He would not be broken by betrayal ever again. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I would find love again, if I would ever trust. But I did know this: I had chosen myself. And that choice was the first real victory I had claimed in years. I never thought the idea of being dead could feel liberating. But that's exactly what it did. After the surgery, the world became strangely quiet. The hospital hallways felt empty, almost surreal, as if life had paused while I had been suspended somewhere between existence and nothingness. People walked past me, whispered, laughed, yet I couldn't hear them clearly. It was as if I were observing the world from behind a pane of frosted glass. Sina sat by my side, always quiet, always patient. "You look different," she said one evening, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Calmer. Stronger." I stared at the ceiling. Calm? Strong? Maybe. But I also felt invisible. Broken. Dead. And that's when an idea started to take shape in my mind. If the world thought I was gone, if Alina and Zahir believed they had erased me from life entirely, I could start over. Not just recover, not just survive. I could rebuild. I could plan. I could rise. It was a dangerous thought. One that most people would call impossible. But I didn't care. The news had already spread quietly. My hospital records, the confusion during my collapse, the 3 minutes of clinical death, all of it combined to create a rumor that I had died. I overheard nurses whispering about my tragic death while adjusting my monitors. Alina and Zahir didn't show up. I imagined them receiving the news, the relief, the satisfaction, the sense of victory. It stung. But then a cold clarity settled over me. Let them think what they want. Their assumptions were irrelevant. Dr. Cameron came to see me one afternoon. "You're lucky," he said gravely. "Not many survive this. You should consider a quieter life from now on. No stress, no confrontations, no complications." I nodded silently, knowing that my life would never be quiet again, but in a different way. A controlled way. I could manipulate my presence. Or rather, my absence. Sina raised an eyebrow. "You're plotting something." I looked at her and smiled faintly. "Something like reclaiming my life." She didn't laugh. She just squeezed my hand. "Be careful." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Once I was cleared for discharge, I walked out of the hospital under a new sense of purpose. I didn't go back to my old apartment. I didn't call Alina. I didn't reach out to anyone who might know me. I left my old life behind, like a corpse leaving a coffin. I rented a small apartment on the other side of the city. It was plain, almost empty, and I liked it that way. Nothing reminded me of them. Nothing reminded me of the life I lost. And for the first time in months, I felt free. Freedom, however, was fragile. I still had a weakened heart. I still had memories that haunted me. And I still had a burning desire, not for revenge yet, but for justice in the form of survival. I started small. A bank account under my real name, small investments, careful monitoring of every transaction. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to compete with Alina or Zahir. I was rebuilding myself quietly, carefully, in shadows. Every day, I worked. Every day, I healed a little more. Every day, I reminded myself of what I had survived. And every night, I thought about the betrayal. It was during one of those nights that I first checked on them, without intending to. A lingering habit of curiosity, or maybe instinct, drove me to search for news about Alina and Zahir. What I found made my stomach twist. They were living together. Openly. Smiling for the world. Posting pictures, flaunting their happiness. I felt nothing at first. Not anger, not envy. Just a cold emptiness. Then, slowly, the reality set in. They were fragile. Their happiness was a facade. I saw Zahir posting complaints about debts, Alina whining about lifestyle frustrations. Small cracks began to appear. And I smiled, not out of joy, but because karma had already started to work in its quiet way. I realized then that I didn't need to intervene. I didn't need to ruin them. The world had already started balancing the scales. My only job was to continue building myself. Weeks passed. Months. My health improved. My stamina returned. My heart was still fragile, yes, but my mind was sharper than ever. I started working remotely, under a new name, using skills I had honed over years: finance, coding, and business management. I invested in a small tech startup, one struggling but full of potential. The founder, Rayhan, welcomed me as a silent partner. I didn't tell anyone my history. I didn't want sympathy or attention. I only wanted results. Rayhan became my mentor, teaching me strategies I had never considered. Slowly, quietly, my investments grew. I made calculated moves, sometimes ruthless, but never reckless. And with every financial step I took, every successful transaction, I felt stronger. Not because I wanted to prove them wrong, but because I was proving myself right. Sana visited often, observing my growth. She didn't comment much, but the pride in her eyes told me she understood. "You're different now," she said one evening, watching me analyze graphs and charts. "I have to be," I replied. "Otherwise, I'll never survive in a world that chews up people like me." She nodded. "And someday, they'll realize what they lost." I smiled faintly. Not bitterly, not angrily. Just quietly. One evening, I walked past my old neighborhood. I didn't go inside my old apartment. I didn't want to see it. But the streets, the shops, the small cafes, they reminded me of the man I had been. Naive, trusting, broken. I realized then that death wasn't just about leaving the world behind. Sometimes it was about becoming someone new, someone untouchable. And that's exactly what I intended to do. By the time I returned to my new apartment, I had made a silent promise. No one would ever hurt me the way they did. No one would ever control my life again. And no one would ever see me broken. I wasn't just alive. I was invisible. Untouchable. And in that invisibility, I found power. I started thinking bigger. Real estate, stocks, investments, small businesses. If I played my cards right, I could control more than just my life. I could control the world they still inhabited, the world where Alina and Zahir thrived on appearances. And I would. But carefully. Patiently. Quietly. Because the best revenge isn't noise. The best revenge is life well lived, and power quietly amassed. And that was the man I was becoming, the man who would rise from his own funeral. By the time I fully recovered, I had stopped being the man who collapsed on the office floor. Gone was the version of me who cried quietly in the apartment, who trusted too easily, who loved too deeply. Now, I moved with precision. Every action had a purpose. Every choice was calculated. Every relationship measured. Sana noticed the change the first time she came to visit my small apartment after I'd moved across the city. She was surprised to find the place almost empty, bare walls, a desk with a laptop, a notebook, and nothing else. "You're different," she said softly, sitting on the single chair I had. "I have to be," I replied, not looking up from my screen. "Being the man I used to be got me betrayed, humiliated, and almost killed." She sighed. "You're right. But don't let it make you bitter." "I won't," I said. And I meant it. Bitterness had no room in the life I was about to build. Strength did. Power did. Focus did. I started small, with the money I had saved from before. I invested in stocks carefully at first, low risk, low attention. But soon, I realized I could do more. Much more. I had knowledge, strategy, and patience. And patience was the most powerful weapon of all. It wasn't long before I invested in a struggling tech company. Its founder, Rayhan, was talented but inexperienced, desperate to keep the business afloat. I offered help, not as a savior, but as a partner who demanded results. "Ahmed," he said one evening during our first meeting, "you don't have to do this. I can find someone else." I smiled faintly. "I'm not doing it for charity. I'm doing it because I see potential. And because I know what it feels like to be underestimated." Rayhan nodded slowly, sensing something in my tone. "Fair enough. But you need to know, it won't be easy." "Nothing worth building ever is," I replied. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. I worked harder than I ever had before. Every day, I tracked numbers, analyzed reports, learned strategies that Rayhan had never even considered. I wasn't doing it to prove anything to the world. I was doing it to prove to myself that I could rise from the ruins of my old life. I hired an assistant, Adil, a young man with sharp instincts and loyalty that reminded me of how I used to be, pure and honest. "Sir," he said once, looking at my charts and graphs, "you're building something incredible. Are you planning to stay behind the scenes forever?" I paused and looked at him. "I don't need recognition," I said. "I just need control." Adil nodded slowly, impressed but not surprised. He understood. Loyalty doesn't need applause. The company slowly started to turn around. Rayhan's initial skepticism melted away as I made calculated moves, small acquisitions, smart partnerships, precise marketing campaigns. I watched as our revenue climbed, as our reputation grew, as our influence expanded. And through it all, I never looked back at Alina or Zahir. I didn't need to. I didn't want to be distracted by their failures or petty drama. My focus was entirely on building my future, my empire, quietly, meticulously. Yet, the temptation was always there. Part of me wanted to see them fail spectacularly. Part of me wanted them to know what they had lost. But I resisted. Patience, I reminded myself, was more powerful than impulse. One evening, Sana came over and found me staring at the city skyline through the apartment window. The lights shimmered like tiny stars, but I only saw opportunity. "You've changed," she said softly. "You're not the man who cried for Alina anymore. You're someone else entirely." I turned to her, my face calm, composed, but my eyes sharp. I had to change. Pain forced me to evolve. Betrayal made me stronger. She nodded. "And Zahir? Alina? Have you thought about them?" I smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Not in the way you think. I'm not here to hurt them. Karma has its way of catching up. I'm here to rise." Her eyes searched mine, perhaps looking for a spark of the old me. But I had none to offer. Only the man I was becoming, the man they had thrown away. Months later, I expanded further. The tech company became profitable. I invested in real estate quietly, buying properties without anyone knowing. I learned to be invisible in plain sight. My wealth grew silently, my influence expanded subtly, and my identity remained secret. And then I realized something that made me grin. I was untouchable. The man who had been betrayed, humiliated, and almost killed was now someone who controlled what mattered: the money, the opportunities, the power. And soon, they would find out that I owned more than they imagined. The idea thrilled me. Not because I wanted revenge, but because life itself had handed me the power to rise while they remained trapped in their mistakes. I called a deal into my office one evening. "Prepare a full report on every property and company we're invested in," I said. "I want complete control over every asset we touch." He looked at me, slightly surprised. "Every asset, sir?" "Yes. Every single one," I replied firmly. "And don't tell anyone else." "Not now." Patience. Adil nodded, trusting me completely. And I knew, in that moment, that the foundation of my new life was solid. Stronger than I had ever imagined. That night, I finally allowed myself a quiet moment of reflection. Sitting alone in my apartment, I thought about the man I had been, the man who loved too easily, trusted too much, and got crushed. I thought about Alina and Zahir, about the betrayal that had almost killed me. And I realized something: I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was free. The anger, the pain, the humiliation, they were all tools now. Weapons to be used for focus, not for hate. The old me might have wanted them to suffer. The new me? He wanted only to rise. And rise I would. By the time I closed my laptop that night, I had made another silent promise. I will rebuild everything they took from me, and more. Not for revenge. Not for recognition. But because I can. Because I survived. Because the man they discarded is now untouchable. And in that promise, I felt a quiet thrill, a certainty that life had a way of balancing the scales in the most unexpected ways. I rarely checked on them directly. I didn't need to. The world has a way of revealing its own justice. Sometimes, you just need to be patient enough to watch. It started small. Zahir lost his job, a restructuring, the company claimed. I saw the announcement in passing, a faint smirk tugging at my lips. Alina's social media accounts, once filled with luxury photos and cheerful smiles, suddenly turned bitter. She complained about bills, rent, and the constant stress of managing a lifestyle they couldn't afford. I didn't intervene. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I simply watched. Because karma, I realized, is most effective when it unfolds quietly, naturally. Weeks later, I checked again. Their life was unraveling faster than I expected. Zahir's arrogance had been his downfall. He had burned bridges at work, thinking he was untouchable. And Alina, her greed had blinded her. She had invested in flashy purchases they couldn't afford, trying to maintain an image that no longer matched reality. The first real shock came when I learned they had moved into a small, crumbling apartment. From penthouses and luxury cars to peeling walls and broken faucets. I felt something strange. Not satisfaction, not exactly. More like a confirmation. The universe had corrected itself. Their choices, their betrayals, their disregard for others, it was all catching up. And I was untouchable in the background, building my empire while they crumbled. I spent my evenings in my office, reviewing the growth of my investments, planning my next steps. Rayhan and Adil noticed my focus, but they didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. They trusted the method behind my silence. Ahmed, Adil said one evening, "Do you ever think about them? About what they're doing?" I looked up from my laptop. My eyes were calm, but inside, a storm of emotions swirled. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I don't interfere. Let life handle itself. Let them see what they lost." He nodded slowly, understanding more than I expected. Loyalty like that doesn't come often. Then came the first real confirmation of their downfall. I stumbled across a news article. Alina and Zahir had been evicted from their apartment. The landlord, frustrated with months of unpaid rent, had filed a formal complaint. Her posts online had turned desperate. She begged for help, asked for favors, and even humiliated herself in public forums, calling out friends for not supporting her lifestyle. I didn't laugh aloud. I didn't celebrate. I simply leaned back in my chair and watched the natural course of consequences unfold. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I allowed a quiet smile. It wasn't joy. It wasn't glee. It was justice. I continued expanding quietly. Every property I acquired, every stock I bought, every small business I invested in, was a step toward something bigger. Not revenge, not punishment, not spectacle, but control. And the more I grew, the more I realized something important: I no longer needed them. Their existence was irrelevant to my life. Their failures only reminded me why I had chosen the path I had. I also realized another truth: people reveal themselves in crisis. And Alina, in her desperation, had shown exactly who she was. Selfish. Greedy. Short-sighted. She had chosen money over love, illusion over reality. And Zahir, he had always been arrogant, thinking he could take what wasn't his. Now he was paying the price. One evening, while reviewing a property I had just purchased, I received a call from a landlord in the neighborhood where Alina and Zahir were temporarily staying. "Mr. Ahmed," the landlord asked hesitantly. I think you should know. Alina and Zahir, they're in trouble. They can't pay, and they're making scenes. It's embarrassing." I remained silent for a moment. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Keep me updated if anything changes." I didn't need to know the details. I didn't need to be involved. I simply filed it away mentally. Because part of the satisfaction came from watching life correct itself. Alina's desperation grew. She started reaching out to distant relatives, trying to salvage some financial security. She even attempted to contact old friends who remembered how cruelly she had treated me, and who refused to help. Zahir, on the other hand, lashed out. He insulted her in public, blamed her for everything, and even got involved in shady schemes to try and recover some wealth. But every attempt failed. Every move he made only dug them deeper. I watched all of it unfold quietly. I didn't interfere. I didn't send money. I didn't even check social media for the latest drama. They came to me. Reports came in from friends, from business contacts, from the occasional news blurb. Their lives were unraveling in real time, like a slow-motion collapse that had nothing to do with me, but everything to do with choices. And I felt nothing but peace. Meanwhile, I continued building my life. My company grew. My investments multiplied. My reputation remained discreet but solid. I had learned the value of invisibility and power. The world could underestimate me. People could ignore me. But the foundation I was creating could not be shaken. Rayhan noticed the change. "Ahmed," he said one evening, "you're different from anyone I've met. You don't just survive, you rise quietly. Strategically. Like you're untouchable." I smiled faintly. "That's the goal." He shook his head, impressed. "I've never seen anyone turn pain into progress like this." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already decided, my life was no longer about anger, revenge, or showing them who I was. It was about being unreachable, untouchable, unstoppable. The first time I truly realized I had won, not over them, not in vengeance, but over myself, was a quiet evening in my apartment. I looked out over the city skyline. Lights glittered like stars, but I didn't see wealth or power. I saw possibility. Alina and Zahir would never be a part of this world. They had destroyed themselves with their own hands. And I had survived. I had thrived. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "The man you discarded, he's gone. The man who remains, he controls everything." And that night, I slept for the first time in months without nightmares. Because the karma they had been running from wasn't me. It was life itself, and life had a way of catching up. I never planned to confront them. I never wanted them to see me, not yet. But the world has a way of creating its own stages, and sometimes, you just have to step into the spotlight at the right moment. The news came quietly, like a whisper I wasn't supposed to hear. Alina's father had passed away. Naturally, she sent out a public announcement, funeral details included. I didn't need to check twice. I knew she would be there. Zahir would be there. All the people who had once mattered to me, or at least, mattered to her, would be there. I felt nothing at first. No anger, no desire for confrontation. Only curiosity. Curiosity can be dangerous. It can turn a quiet, controlled man into something unpredictable. I arrived at the cemetery hours before the funeral started, disguised in a simple dark coat and sunglasses. I didn't need to be recognized. I didn't need anyone to know I was alive. Not yet. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. A soft wind carried the scent of wet earth and flowers. It was quiet. Too quiet. I saw them before they saw me. Alina and Zahir, hand in hand, walking together as if the world belonged to them. Her hair was tied neatly, her dress modest but expensive-looking. Zahir walked with an air of arrogance, as if he owned every inch of the space they were in. I allowed myself a small smile. The irony was delicious. They had no idea I was watching. The service began. Friends and family offered prayers. Alina wept gracefully, the perfect widow, the perfect granddaughter, the perfect image of someone who belonged to high society. Zahir held her hand, whispering comfort, or perhaps boasting to himself that he had survived alongside her. I stayed in the shadows, silent and invisible. The world thought I was dead. And in that illusion, I felt power. Power is intoxicating. It doesn't roar. It whispers. It allows you to watch your enemies falter without lifting a finger. And watch them falter, I did. As the ceremony ended, people began leaving. Alina and Zahir lingered near the grave, whispering, holding hands, pretending they were a united front. Then, as they turned to leave, I stepped forward. Not aggressively. Not angrily. Just forward, calm, controlled. Alina froze. I saw her stiffen. Zahir's hand tightened around hers. Their eyes widened, first with confusion, then with disbelief. It was perfect. I removed my sunglasses slowly, letting my gaze settle on them. Alina's face drained of color. "Ahmed," she whispered, her voice trembling. I let the moment hang. The wind carried her fear to me. The arrogance that had once filled the space between us was gone. Only uncertainty remained. Zahir took a step forward. This isn't possible. You were dead." I allowed a small, controlled smile. I said softly. But apparently, funerals aren't my style. Alina's hands trembled as she gripped Zahir's arm. What? Why? How? I stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. Every movement was calculated, every word measured. "I survived," I said. "I rebuilt. I've grown stronger while you squandered the lives you thought were yours." Zahir's jaw tightened. "Ahmed, it's not what you think." I raised a hand. "Save it. I don't want excuses. I don't want apologies. I don't want your lies." Alina's lips quivered. I didn't know. I thought you." I cut her off. "You didn't care enough to notice, did you? You chose him over me. You chose money over love." And now, my voice dropped, low, sharp, like ice. "Now you see that the man you discarded is not only alive, he's untouchable." Her knees weakened slightly. Zahir stepped forward, trying to shield her, trying to act as if he were in control. But I didn't need him to move. He was already exposed. Vulnerable. I looked at them both, letting the silence stretch. Let the weight of my survival, my rise, my invisibility for so long, hit them fully. Finally, I spoke again, my voice cold but steady. "You thought I was gone. You thought you had one. But look at me now. I've survived what you threw at me. I've thrived while you struggled." Alina's eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, but of fear. The woman who once believed she could manipulate life itself now realized she had no power over me. Zahir's smirk had vanished. His confidence shattered under the reality I embodied. I leaned closer, close enough that they could see the clarity, the control in my eyes. "The man you betrayed, he owns more than you can imagine. Your choices have consequences. Life corrects itself, often quietly, often slowly." And I let a pause linger, savoring the moment. I've become its instrument. Alina's tears fell freely now. She opened her mouth, probably to beg, to plead, to explain. But no words would undo what she had done. I stepped back, letting the weight of my presence linger. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to strike. Just being there, alive, powerful, untouchable, was enough. They had learned it at my funeral. As I walked away, leaving them behind near the grave, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not for revenge. Not for anger. Not even for satisfaction. But for myself. The man who had been betrayed, humiliated, and nearly killed was gone. The man who remained was untouchable, free, and unstoppable. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. And as the wind carried the last echo of their voices, trembling and disbelieving, I whispered to myself. The life they chose for themselves is crumbling. The life I've built is mine. Forever. For the first time since that day I walked into my apartment and discovered betrayal, I felt peace. And a quiet thrill. Because the next chapter of my life was just beginning. The world still thought I had died. That illusion was my most powerful weapon. I never sought fame, attention, or recognition. I only wanted control, the kind of control that comes not from force, but from silence, patience, and strategy. I had risen quietly, invisibly, building an empire that no one, not Alina, not Zahir, not anyone who had ever doubted me, could touch. It started with the small victories. The tech company, the properties, the investments. But it didn't stop there. I reinvested my profits strategically, acquiring businesses that people overlooked, reviving struggling companies, and creating alliances with people who were ambitious but loyal. I became a ghost in the system, a man who existed in transactions, in corporate moves, in quiet whispers behind closed doors. Yet the influence I held was immense. And in this invisibility, I found freedom. One evening, Sana came over. She had been with me from the very beginning, silently supporting, quietly guiding. She had never judged, never pitied. And now, she stood in my apartment, watching me analyze a market report with meticulous detail. "You've become unstoppable," she said softly. I didn't smile. I only nodded. "I've survived what should have killed me. I've outlived betrayal. And I've built something no one expected. Something no one can touch." She looked out the window at the city lights. "And Alina? Zahir? Are you done with them?" I turned to her, calm but sharp. "Done? No. They will live their lives believing they have escaped the consequences of their choices. But their world is crumbling. Slowly, quietly. Every misstep, every bad decision, every consequence of greed and arrogance, is playing out exactly as it should." She nodded, understanding fully. "You don't even have to touch them." I smiled faintly. "Exactly. I've learned that the best revenge isn't action. It's existence. Rising while they fall. Thriving while they stumble. Being untouchable, untarnished, unstoppable." Sana placed her hand over mine. "And someday, someone will recognize what you've built. Someone deserving of your trust. Perhaps. But for now, I didn't need anyone to witness it. I only needed to live it." Alina's downfall had become almost complete by now. Her Instagram posts, once glossy displays of luxury, had disappeared. She had no social standing, no influence, no credibility. Zahir's arrogance had gotten him blacklisted from the industry they had relied on. I didn't interfere. I didn't need to. Their choices had done all the work. I occasionally received updates through business contacts. Their debts were mounting. Their reputation, fragile at best, was gone. And when I thought about the woman who had once laughed at me, cheated on me, and abandoned me, I felt nothing but quiet satisfaction. Not joy. Not anger. Not even bitterness. Just peace. Because I had won without lifting a hand. My empire continued to grow. I acquired a failing real estate firm and transformed it into one of the most respected property management companies in the city. I invested in tech, logistics, and small startups that showed potential. Each success wasn't just profit, it was a testament to the man I had become. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't post photos. I didn't announce my achievements. I only built, quietly, invisibly, like a ghost shaping the world around me. And the irony was delicious. The people who had once believed I was weak, powerless, and dead had no idea who they were truly dealing with. One quiet evening, I received a call from a journalist, eager for an interview about my latest business success. "Mr. Ahmed," the voice said excitedly, "your company's growth has been remarkable." Investors are calling it the comeback story of the decade. How did you do it? I paused. Calm. Calculated. Controlled. Hard work. Patience. And surviving what life throws at you, I said. The journalist chuckled nervously. There's talk about your personal life. About your history. Is it true? I hung up without another word. My story didn't need to be told. My life didn't need validation. My success spoke for itself. Alina's path eventually crossed mine again, but not by chance. She appeared at one of my properties, trying to negotiate a deal she thought she could manipulate. She didn't recognize me at first. I let her falter, watched her struggle with my calm presence, my authority, my untouchable aura. Ahmed, she said finally, realization dawning on her face. You're alive? I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, letting her feel the weight of everything she had done, everything she had lost. Yes, I said finally. I'm alive. Stronger than ever. And I've built something you will never touch. Her eyes filled with shock, fear, and regret. I thought you were gone forever. I didn't know. You didn't care enough to know, I said softly, coldly. And now, life has corrected itself. You lost what you chose to discard. I survived what you thought would destroy me. I thrived while you stumbled. Her lips trembled. She tried to speak, but no words could undo the past. I turned away. My empire wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about me, surviving, rising, and living untouchably. And that was enough. Weeks later, I stood on the balcony of my newest property, looking out over the city lights. The wind carried a soft chill, and I inhaled deeply. I thought about the man I had been, the man who trusted too easily, loved too deeply, and nearly died because of it. He was gone. The man who remained was untouchable. Invisible. Powerful. Respected. Feared. And completely free. I whispered to myself, softly but firmly. The man they buried is dead. The man who remains owns everything. And no one, not Alina, not Zahir, not anyone, can ever take that from me. Sana appeared quietly behind me, placing a hand on my shoulder. You did it, she said. I nodded, feeling the weight of everything I had survived, everything I had built. We did it, I corrected. I didn't do this alone. She smiled, softly, proudly. Then what now? I looked out at the city, lights twinkling like stars. Now. I live. I thrive. I control my life, and I let the world run its course. Whatever happens next. I am ready. And for the first time in years, I felt completely alive. Because the man who had been betrayed, humiliated, and left for dead, had risen. And nothing, no one, could stop him. The city never sleeps, and neither did I, not fully. The empire I had built in silence demanded attention, strategy, and careful vigilance. Every deal, every property, every investment was a thread in a web that only I fully understood. And while Alina and Zahir had crumbled under their own choices, the world beyond them was vast, full of opportunities, and hidden threats. I realized that surviving betrayal and rising from the ashes wasn't enough. True power came from creating a legacy that could never be stolen, never be questioned, never be undermined. It started with the boardroom. I had expanded my influence quietly, taking seats on multiple companies' boards without public acknowledgement. Each move was subtle, invisible, but strategic. Rayhan watched me one afternoon as I signed documents approving mergers and acquisitions. "Ahmed," he said, hesitating, "you're no one's equal. You've built something no one even knew you were building." I smiled faintly. "That's the point." He shook his head. "You could have fame, recognition." I laughed softly. "Recognition is a weakness. Visibility makes you vulnerable. I am untouchable because I exist in shadows. People underestimate what they cannot see." Rayhan nodded slowly. "I understand now. You've truly become something else entirely." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My empire spoke for me. Meanwhile, news of Alina and Zahir's downfall reached me indirectly, but the details no longer brought satisfaction. They were irrelevant. They had nothing to do with my empire anymore. I checked in quietly, only to ensure that they didn't stumble into fraud, bankruptcy, or danger that could attract unwanted attention. Not that I was concerned for them. It was more about maintaining control over every domino I had set in motion. Alina was attempting to rebuild a meager business, but it failed spectacularly. Zahir was quietly desperate, attempting to recover his reputation, but doors were closed. The world had already judged them. Their karma had played out naturally, quietly, perfectly. I realized something then. Revenge is most satisfying when you don't lift a finger. One evening, as I reviewed the books for the 100th time, I heard a soft knock at my door. It was Sanaa. She entered without hesitation, holding a small folder. "Ahmed," she said quietly, "there's something you need to see. It's about a new development in the city, an opportunity and a challenge." I took the folder, scanning the details. A large development project, heavily indebted and mismanaged. A goldmine if handled correctly, but a nightmare if approached recklessly. I looked at her calmly. "This is perfect," I said. "And dangerous. Just how I like it." She smiled faintly. "You really are untouchable now." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the potential. Every empire has risks. Every empire has enemies. But my advantage was invisible strength, patience, and strategy. The next morning, I called Adil and Rayhan. "We take the project," I instructed. "We acquire it quietly, restructure the debts, and create control points in every sector related to it. This isn't about publicity. This is about domination." Adil frowned slightly. "Domination? That's a strong word." I fixed him with a steady gaze. "Domination is the only word that applies. If we do this right, we control not just this property, but influence over everything connected to it. Banks, suppliers, contracts, even politicians." Rayhan nodded, understanding the magnitude of the plan. "You're thinking bigger than anyone I've ever seen. Bigger than most corporations." I allowed a small, faint smile. "The bigger the plan, the safer the empire. When people think they know your limits, they underestimate you. That's where power grows, quietly, invisibly." Days turned into weeks. The acquisition and restructuring were surgical, calculated, precise, and ruthless, but without spectacle. Employees, investors, and creditors were never aware of the hand guiding the process. By the time they realized, the company was already stabilized, profitable, and under my control. The feeling was intoxicating, but not for ego. For control. For freedom. For the satisfaction of shaping the world on my terms. Late one night, I stood on the balcony of the newly acquired building, staring out at the city skyline. Lights shimmered like a million stars, but I didn't see luxury or fame. I saw a network, a system, a world quietly bending to my will. Sana appeared behind me, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. Ahmed, are you happy? I considered it for a moment. I'm alive. I've survived what should have destroyed me. I've built something untouchable. I've outlasted betrayal, I've mastered patience, and I've shaped my future. Happiness isn't the right word, but yes. I'm fulfilled. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the city lights. Then you've truly won. I nodded, letting the wind carry away the memories of the man I used to be, the one who cried for Alina, trusted too easily, and nearly died from heartbreak. He was gone. The man who remained, strong, precise, untouchable, was immortal in influence, even if not in life. Months later, a final twist arrived quietly. A company that Zahir had attempted to revive failed spectacularly, with debts he could not repay. Alina's last attempt at entrepreneurship collapsed, leaving her humiliated and financially ruined. I didn't need to act. I didn't need to intervene. Life had done the work. And I watched, from my invisible empire, as the people who had once destroyed me realized that they had no power over the man they betrayed. Standing in the penthouse of my largest property, overlooking the city, I whispered to myself, "The man you thought was dead is alive. He survived. He thrived. He rose. And everything he touches, everything he builds, is untouchable." Sana, quietly observing, said, "Ahmed, you're a legend." I shook my head. Not a legend. Just a man who refused to be broken. Who refused to die twice. And who built a life no one can take away. The empire was mine. The past was behind me. And the future was limitless. Because the man who had once been betrayed, humiliated, and left for dead, had become unstoppable. And this time, no one, not Alina, not Zahir, not fate itself, could touch him.